I'm going to do everything I can, and all of us in the administration are, to join in again, when Congress is back at it, to get an immigration bill that will give us once again control of our borders.
Many factors hindered Simpson and Mazzoli's efforts to pass immigration reform during the 97th congressional session. Their efforts were thwarted by the lack of time in the lame duck session. The bill wasn't even considered until the second half of the legislative session. When the subcommittees in the House and Senate finally did hold joint hearings for the Simpson-Mazzoli bill, it died in committee after being amended to death. House members filed over 300 amendments, many of which were highly controversial. In addition, there was much opposition in the House to immigration reform, primarily because House members were pressured by their constituents and interest groups, like the AFL-CIO and MALDEF, to not pass many of these reforms.
During the 98th Congress, the legislation failed in its second attempt. Speaker of the House Thomas P. O'Neill blocked this bill from going through the legislative process. However, 1 month after he had killed H.R. 1510, he announced that the House of Representatives would take up the bill early in 1984. On April 5, 1982, the bill was reintroduced, but died in conference committee action.
In the conference committee, both sides came to agree on most ideas and proposals. However, what ultimately led to the death of the bill was an employer-sanctioned amendment that Republicans wanted to pass. It would have been extremely punitive to business owners who hired undocumented workers. This move proved to be too much, as the Democrats in that conference coalesced around Senator Ted Kennedy and refused to accept it, citing that this would lead ultimately to discrimination against all Hispanics looking for work out of employer fear that they might be hiring an undocumented worker. There were also Democratic leadership powers in the House that were to go against this bill. Speaker Tip O'Neill knew that President Reagan might have actually vetoed the bill in this form so that he could obtain Hispanic support. That, coupled with numerous Hispanic interest groups lobbying heavily against this bill, precipitated him to be heavily anti-Hispanic, and the current makeup of the House, which could have translated into passage, meant that the futility of this bill was meant to be.
Unlike the 98th Congress, the Conference Committee met the next day and within a week had a conference report ready to be approved by both chambers. On October 16, before the final passage vote took place in the Senate, Senator Phil Gramm, acting as the filibuster pivot, attempted to filibuster the bill with a long speech, criticizing the bill's farm worker provisions and complaining that the measure was too costly. A day later, after adopting Graham's idea of waiving the Budget Act, the Senate was able to invoke cloture with a vote of 69 to 21, 9 more than necessary to end the filibuster. In the end, with bipartisan support, the conference report was approved in the Senate and in the House. President Reagan signed S-1200 into law on November 6, 1986.
Although neither Representative Mazzoli's nor Senator Simpson's district jurisdictions were anywhere near the border, implementing an immigration reform was of paramount significance to them in wanting to secure a reputation. As Mayhew said, members of Congress care about other things such as passing good policy and gaining prestige within an institution. The work Senator Simpson put into getting this legislation passed in the 97th Congress was a major element to his nomination by his Republican colleagues for him to become the Senate Majority Whip. The multiple streams model successfully portrays the legislative process of the 99th Congress. The problem was that Americans were out of work due to the 3 million illegal migrant workers, and the policy at hand was the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. The politics suggested that Republicans needed to gain more seats in the House to be in control. Republicans knew that Hispanics were a growing minority, and gaining their support through the immigration reform would expand their electoral base. The legislative process of the IRCA confirms Kriebel's idea that gridlock is common but not constant, and that winning coalitions have more than minimum winning votes.
Finally, after 5 years of trying, Congress clears the legislation that will transform the nation's immigration laws. Nonetheless, the law of 1986 has been largely considered a failure. 3 million immigrants were legalized, but the law did not slow illegal immigration or create a framework to deal with it going forward.